I'd like to start, though, with politics, Rodney, with, of course, the big story is the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Friday night. And now we await Trump's decision on Saturday. And I may actually pop in for a live video for everybody who's watching when we get the announcement to give a reaction to that. It seems, well, first of all, let's go back just a little bit, Rodney. This wasn't. It's weird with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's been sick for a long time. She's 87 years old, and yet I think something in my mind was, I don't know, she's just going to be sick forever and live forever, I guess, sort of a mentality. It was, in a weird way, it was a little surprising, wasn't it? Or was it maybe just the timing?
Well, I mean, the timing makes it, more interesting, obviously. But she had been sick with pancreatic cancer, which was very difficult to live with for years. And the fact that she had beaten that back, particularly at her age, was amazing. I mean, it was absolutely amazing that she'd been able to do that.
Now, there's outrage on the left and cheerleading on the right as Senator Mitch McConnell was trying to whip up the votes. Now, it appears that he has the votes, but I want to ask you, to have avoided all this, I want to know what you think of this. And this is certainly, I'm not the first to suggest this, that maybe Ruth Bader Ginsburg, considering her health, maybe she should have stepped aside before President Trump took office with enough time for President Obama to nominate someone. What do you think of that argument?
Well, yes, if you want to continue a certain view of jurisprudence by justice on the court, then the safest course of action would have been for her to retire in the middle of Obama's second term. Mm-hmm. However, that's a really unusual thing to do. Now, she already had some health issues back then, by the way, and she was clearly, advanced age. She was over 80 at the time, and so she could have done that. But in the midst of that, you then get, within a couple of months there in early 2016, you had Scalia pass, and the Senate said, oh, no, we're not moving on any Supreme Court nominations. And so while Obama's still in office before the election in 2016. And so even if she had looked at it and said, well, perhaps I should retire near the end of his second term, that was kind of, there was a roadblock thrown up by the Senate who said, we're not going to consider anything. And so then the expectation that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then when she didn't, and then of course, if McConnell had not brought up anything during the election, he certainly wasn't going to do it during the lame duck there at the end of 2016. So if she had some of those thoughts, clearly they were derailed by Mitch McConnell in 2016.
Does this rank hypocrisy in the part of Senate Republicans to have not done that, but instead they're moving forward here, basically with just over a month, really, maybe 5 weeks time to get somebody through before the election? What do you think of that?
Absolutely, total hypocrites, but total hypocrites on both sides.
Yeah.
I can make a nuanced argument anytime you want. I can say for the Republicans, well, the end of Obama's term, he was lame duck. He was not going to remain in office no matter what happened. Therefore, it should have remained open for the next president because it was going to be somebody different no matter what. Mm-hmm. That speaks very well for, of course, the Republicans. I can make another nuanced argument for the Democrats where it is your job to do these things back then, and so the senators should have done it. And today, if you were going to say, hey, wait until the next administration, today, the polls all suggest, and the polls are all we have. I know that a lot of people don't believe them, but it's what we have. Okay. The polls suggest Biden will win, and so therefore, it would be imprudent from that standpoint to allow this president to nominate a Supreme Court justice in the waning days of his administration when he's not expected to be in office 4.5 months from now.
Yeah.
But again, hypocrites on both sides. It just is what it is, right?
Now, does hypocrisy matter? I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot, would you expect? I'm basically saying, this is power politics, right? And there's nothing here. The rules around it come from the Constitution about confirming a Supreme Court judge, and they're pretty vague, really.
Right, they are. Hypocrisy matters more than we give it credit for, because what it means is people like me, people like you, people like our voters lose faith in the belief that our elected officials who hold national office will do things for the good of the nation. We think that they're just in it for the power. And we can point to a million things to suggest that this is true, not the least of which being that gaining national office appears to be nothing more than a reelection game. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just it. And so when you see politicians in office for decades, it's like, well, wait a second, what's your career? Well, we know their career. It's politics. And who believes that that's good for us? Who believes that that's the best way to run the nation? And so there was a decent suggestion to your point that the rules around Supreme Court justices are not clear. The number can be 9, it can be 14, it can be 7, right? It can be 28, it can be anything. And so to pack the court per se, yeah, any president could do that as long as he's got a willing Congress. But then another president with a willing Congress could whittle it down. So there also are not rules on terms. We have selection for life. And so selection for life is the rule, right? And so why not put term limits on it? Why not just roll it out and say, look, Supreme Court justices are going to serve for 12, 14, 16 years, something longer than an administration that just comes in, and just know that you have this staggered rollover so that we don't get into what we started with in this conversation, which is appointing jurists for what we think of as their jurisprudence point of view.
Yeah. Now, exactly. It becomes a death watch, which is really, it's really a strange thing. And yeah, and I don't. They're appointed for life. Scalia, well, they're all appointed for life, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg this is my job, and I'm going to work it until I'm dead. And
but they do retire. I mean, Kennedy retired clearly.
Yeah.
And so they do retire from time to time. Typically, they retire for health reasons because, frankly, they got too old to do the job they believe they were there to do. But if you put in term limits, it gets rid of a lot of that. Frankly, I'm a term limits fan for all of them, not just the president, but senators, House members, you name it.
Because you get career politicians, career judges or lifetime judges. Now, let me ask you 2 quick questions. If the shoe was on the other foot, would the Democrats do anything differently? And no. So quickly, no. And now, if Trump was not the president, do you think Republicans would be doing this now, or would they wait?
I think they would be doing it now.
So this is what it is. So all the hemming and hawing.
Well, remember, Harry Reid started all of this when he blew up the filibuster for judicial nominations. And so when Harry Reid did this as a Democrat leading the Senate, a Democrat from Nevada, when he got rid of the filibuster, he took away power from the minority. And everyone looked at it at the time, I believe it was 2013, and said, hey, man, you're really not going to like this when the shoe is on the other foot. And he's like, well, it's just for the lower justices. And it's like, once you open the door a little bit, the door is going to swing wide. And of course, that's exactly what happened. And so now we have it for the higher court justices, the appellate court, and the Supreme Court. And guess what? The Democrats are already talking about removing the filibuster completely if they take the Senate, so that they can pass any law they want in the Senate without power to the minority. And I find that very interesting because what Mitch McConnell has done, and while he is clearly a master of the rules, Robert's House rules, he has left the filibuster in place for many things, which means that the Democrats have been able to stop legislation as they want, even though they're in the minority. And so they open the door. Reid opened the door. I don't know that every Democrat agreed with him or whatever, but he certainly started all of this.
Now, some may be watching this after Trump makes his pick, and it's down to Amy Coney Barrett and Barbara Lagoa. Now, on the odds site predictit.org, Amy Coney Barrett has an 81% chance versus just 20% for Lagoa, and then there's a couple small stragglers because Trump basically said it's going to be a woman, so it knocked out all the male contenders. So there's some here I've never heard of: Joan Larson, Allison Rushing, I've heard; Bridget Bade, I haven't heard. Rodney, do you want to? Would you go with the bettors here?
Yeah, I think Barrett is the obvious choice for a couple of reasons. One, she's considered to be a very bright person in the legal world. She hasn't served on a higher court for a long time. I can't remember how long her appointment's been. I want to say a year, maybe 2. And so she just didn't have a lot of that experience. I believe she was a con law professor before that. But another notable con law professor was President Barack Obama. Anyway, but but she's been through the ringer already. And that's a very valuable thing, to have somebody whose name was already out there and people have already published their hit pieces. They've already said, oh, she's, a Catholic, and so she brings all this craziness with her. And so that sort of stuff, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm saying that the arrows people were going to sling at her have been slung. And so the fact that you have that known quantity is pretty darn valuable.
She's a religious extremist. She's going to bring back, or she's going to make The Handmaid's Tale reality, or something. It's interesting the way this gets framed, but we'll just leave that aside for now, because the question then is, so we don't, we'll see who it's going to be, but then the real question will be, will there be confirmation hearings, or even should there be at this point? Rodney, it seems like Mitch McConnell already whipped up the votes to confirm. And if they're a yes, then, is this just all theater? And what's the point? Maybe they should just move to a vote. What do you think?
Well, you're stretching my knowledge of Robert's rules and the committee assignments. My understanding is the Senate Judiciary Committee is required to vote and then make their recommendation known to the floor, and then the floor can have a vote brought by the Senate Majority Leader. So yeah. I believe it has to go through the Senate Judiciary Committee to get there. Not sure, but I think so. And so, but to the question of theater, you bet. That's what this is. There's almost no question in my mind that if the nominee is Barrett, that she would get nominated. And I don't think there's doubt in much of anybody else's mind either. And part of it does go back to the fact that she's already a known quantity. So we're not trying to find out things. We're not trying to vet her. We're just trying to basically rehash what was already hashed in the press a couple of years ago.
I wonder if there are hearings, what the Democrats' strategy would be, if they're even going to go after Amy Coney Barrett or whoever the nominee is, and just basically use their time to go after Trump. I think that's because it's basically a foregone conclusion.
Well, I don't know. I don't know their strategy. I would assume that they're going to skip past her and speak to the process itself, because that's the safer strategy. Otherwise, they're attacking a woman. And so they would instead move to, well, that's okay, go ahead. When Biden takes office, we'll move the court from 9 to 11 or 13, and he will spend the next 3 years appointing those justices to bring the court back into what they would consider to be balance.
So you don't expect to see a repeat of Brett Kavanaugh, a gang rapist, and predator? No, you don't expect that?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. That would that would not be a good look leading into an election.
Last thing before we move on, what do you make of the Democrat threats to go nuclear? Something I talked about to our subscribers here, which is of course packing the court, which you mentioned, going statehood for DC, Puerto Rico, Guam, maybe anywhere where they could get 2 senators. What do you think of that?
I think DC has a really good case for it. I happen to live in DC in my college years. Their motto is taxation without representation. Mm-hmm. They are a very poorly run district, has been for decades. If you look at what goes on in the district in terms of education and crime and everything, it's just horrible. So that doesn't really speak to the further management. They do have a representative in Congress, but their budget and everything actually comes through Congress, which is really kind of weird. So if they were made a state, perhaps they could get some oversight that would help. I don't know. Puerto Rico has beat this around a long time. The Puerto Ricans themselves appear to oscillate on whether or not they want to be a state.
Yeah, but they seem to like where they are, don't they?
I'm sorry?
They seem to like where they are a little bit because they can kind of double dip here and there. They get some of the benefits of not quite statehood, but and some independence on the other hand. Right.
And so, but they do get, a percentage of benefits, right? They don't get full Medicare, I believe, and other things. And so there are some cuts to that. But they appear to like the independence, as you said. And so do they want it? I don't know. DC, I think, would be pretty fast and pretty easy. And if Democrats control both houses, it looks like something that would happen, that would, of course, increase the number of senators that you would presume would lean Democratic. Puerto Rico, not so sure, but so definitely would be on the table.
So do you have an opinion either way? Or you just let them to see if the process works out? Because what's your thought there? I mean, do you support it? Or do you just want to see what happens?
I don't really have an opinion on it. Puerto Rico, I remember, I mean, Hawaii wasn't a state, right? And
Yeah.
so we did that. Alaska is a very different case given how that came in. But is there a reason for Puerto Rico not to be? I'm not a scholar or an expert on Puerto Rico, but when you look at it, it's been a territory for, I don't know, 100 years. And so why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't you just kind of formalize that, given its distance from the United States? It's fairly close, and just kind of, make it a thing. And so I don't really have an opinion on that. The District of Columbia, I would like to see it because I'd like to see better management in the district.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a state. It was meant to be separate for a very specific reason, right? So that the house of government was not beholden to a group.
Right.
And that kind of issue would remain a problem. So I don't have as much of a feeling on that. I would think if I was going to walk through it, I would just as soon see it absorbed into Maryland. I mean, if you're going to make it a state, if your argument is that, well, it needs oversight, well, okay, just let it be part of a state that's already right there.
Yeah.
Of course, that wouldn't serve, a purpose of getting new senators, but it would serve an oversight purpose. I guess I'm much more interested in something that doesn't get a lot of play, which is decentralizing the agencies and departments of the government, whereas Trump had a move to push the Department of Agriculture out across the states and Bureau of Land Management out across the states, which of course I know they're in Colorado and stuff. But the point is, get these agencies closer to the people they actually serve instead of having so much of it concentrated inside the Beltway. And I think that's an idea I would support because I think it might serve our purposes better.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I would love to see that as well. Yeah, move those agencies, just spread them all out. Just like, sort of like almost like a Federal Reserve district system or something. Even if it's not perfect, maybe you just, even transportation, even if it's not in DC, maybe just move it to Chicago or something like that. Just spread it out around the country. I definitely support that. I think that's a fantastic idea.